Hi everyone, today we're talking about how much you should study for an important exam such as the New South Wales Selective test or the Opportunity Class exam or any other important exam that you are preparing for. This year, the selective exam in particular is being held on the 4th of May 2023, and every year more and more students are studying and preparing for this exam. It's important to remember that there is no one-size-fits-all answer to this question, and the amount of time you need to study would depend on a number of different factors. Every student is different and the way we learn is also different. That means depending on the student, they may need to study more or less compared to other students, even though the goal is the same. Although I'll be giving you and sharing with you today my step-by-step process for students to follow and give a general guideline for them to listen to. Let's get into it. For context, every student wants to do well in an exam, whether it's the New South Wales Selective test, NAPLAN test, HAST exam, or just an exam in school. You need to know how much you should study for it. For students who already have a pretty good foundation and has the right resources and has the right approach, they may not have to study as much compared to a student who's quite behind in their studies and doesn't know where to begin. The same will also apply if you have multiple exams to prepare for. And remember, the selective exam in New South Wales has 4 different components, being the reading comprehension, mathematical reasoning, writing, and thinking skills. That means if you only study for reading comprehension more than the other subjects, you will likely improve more in reading comprehension, but may lag behind or stagnate in those other subjects. You have to be smart depending on what your goal is and adapt what I'll be teaching you to your specific situation. The first step is to assess your current knowledge and understanding of the material that is being assessed. Consider how well you already know the material and how much time you have left to study. If you are starting right now in January 2023 and the test is in May 2023, you have about a 4-month window or just a little bit shy to that to study for it. If you are in year 5 in 2023, you have about 15 months to prepare for it. This may sound like a lot more time, but it is important to use it wisely. If a student has 4 months to prepare for the exam, but they're actually doing it efficiently and properly, but the person with 15 months is wasting it all away, they're not studying properly, and they're doing bits and pieces with no clear direction, it is not going to benefit you even if you have that extra months compared to the student who's already in year 6. Next, review the exam format and content to get a sense of the relative importance of the different topics and help you prioritize your study. Do a test to see which areas that you're good in and weak in before you begin to spend more time on these weaker areas. Most tutoring centers will have an exam that you can complete before you start with them. If they don't have an exam, try to do the New South Wales Selective sample paper. There honestly is not enough time to go through every single component, especially if you're just starting now in just 4 months. But if you've been studying since year 4 or even longer than that, I'm hoping that you have gone through a lot of that material compared to someone who's just starting now. What we do at Bings Academy is that for all new students preparing for the New South Wales Selective exam, they have to do a test. That will then tell us which areas in particular that we need to cover compared to areas that they're already pretty good at. If they're already pretty good at certain topic areas, we are most likely not going to cover that, because if we only have 4 months to go until the test, it's much better for us to focus on the areas that they are most weakest in. Imagine if we do not do a detailed test. It means that whatever we cover in the lessons is not going to be specific or tailored to the actual student. And when we only have a limited amount of time until the exam, every lesson and every hour that you do spending into studying is going to be very valuable for the student. If they only have a few months to exam, you don't have the luxury to cover all their strong points as well as their weak points. The same should apply for parents and students. Know the different parts of the exam and content so you can prioritize what to cover and what you can cover less based on the time that you have. Thirdly, create a study schedule and allocate your time accordingly. The schedule can be a certain subject on one day of the week and a different subject on another day of the week. I don't recommend doing different subjects in a single session or day like maths, then switching to writing and then reading all in the same day, because it involves something called context switching. Context switching is when you switch between different tasks or subjects because they all seem important to you. However, according to a psychologist, Weinberg, each subject that you switch can eat up to your productivity to about 20 to 80%. So if you study reading for 10 minutes and then you go to maths for 15 minutes and then switch back, you will lose a lot of productivity. Break your study time into smaller chunks and take breaks to avoid burnout as well. You don't need to do hours and hours of study, especially if you're not used to it. If you're used to only studying an hour a week, if you suddenly have a study timetable where you have to do 4 hours a day, you will burn out and it's not going to be sustainable for you at all. If anything, it's going to be more harmful than beneficial. But it also means you should not use it as an excuse to think that 30 minutes a day is going to be too much. Just because you're not used to studying an hour a day doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to do 30 minutes to an hour a day. I think anyone can actually do that, so don't make that an excuse for you to not study enough. Fourthly, practice with sample questions or past exams to get a sense of the type of questions that will be asked and identify any areas you need to spend more time in. This is going to be quite a bit difficult for the New South Wales Selective test, as there's only 2 past exams and some questions are omitted, but the idea is still there, especially if you are taking this exam or approach in the future. That is when knowing the right tutor can be beneficial to assist in this situation, or even going to group tutoring can be beneficial since they generally provide a lot more practice material compared to one-on-one tutoring that we do. Keep in mind to not buy outdated resources and books. I constantly see parents trying to sell secondhand resources, but the books are for the old and outdated selective exam. Do not do this. When you are preparing for an important exam and you only have a limited amount of time to study for it, then why would you want your son or any student to be studying questions that are not going to be tested? Or alternatively, if the style of questions is going to be vastly different compared to what it was before. I still have parents tell me today, yes, there's thinking skills, but I have a general ability book that my other son did and he made it into Balcombe Hills, so it's close enough. I saw and compared some of the questions for general ability and thinking skills, and it's similar enough, so I don't need to buy any book. This is the most foolish thing ever, and you should really compare each and every component of those 2 exams, and you'll quickly notice that there's a lot more differences compared to similarities between the general ability exam of what it was before to current thinking skills exam to what it is today. The 5th and final step is to make sure you allow yourself enough time to rest and relax before the exam. If your study timetable is to study 2 hours a day for the days leading up to the exam, take a breather. Getting a good night's sleep and being well rested can make a big difference in your academic performance. Being stressed and deprived of sleep because you are so nervous about the exam will not help anyone. I remember for some exams in high school, I would stay up late trying to cram information in my brain. That might work for some of my other friends who were in selective, but it didn't work for me personally. I was groggy, I could only remember bits and pieces of information, and the fundamentals that I drilled in weeks ago that I didn't think I needed to do and revise the night before, I ended up being confused about it and misrelating some of the concepts together. This made me not confident when taking the exam, and I ended up not doing well in that test. I use this as a learning opportunity for you watching this video to understand that rest and relaxation right before an exam is important to actually perform better, which may be a bit different compared to what other people may be telling you to do. Now that I've gone through my 5 steps in telling you how much you need to study a day, is there a specific time? I've seen comments on YouTube saying there's specific scores in an exam and how much time that they should be studying every day to prepare for this exam. But to be honest, like I said before at the start of this video, there is no one-size-fits-all answer to this question. And the amount of time that you study will depend on a number of different factors, like I mentioned above. If I really had to say a time though, as a general rule of thumb, I would recommend to study for at least an hour or two each day leading up to the exam. For an important exam like the selective test where there's 4 different exams, this should not just be done in a few weeks or in a few months before the exam where you're only doing an hour or two a day. If anything, you might want to ramp up that time depending on where you are. However, you may need to study for longer periods of time closer to the exam day if you're feeling less prepared. Remember, it's the quality of your studying is more important than the quantity of time that you actually spend studying. Focus on actively engaging with the material and finding ways to effectively retain that information. I feel like for my writing classes with students, I try to compact it with so much information so that we only focus on the critical parts that the student might only remember and requires. I try to remove the fluff, and that allows students to learn a bit better because everything that I say is more or less important. So if we have a 1-hour class a week, that might be better than another place's 3-hour class a week where they don't focus on the important aspects, where they spend a lot of time on reviewing homework and just pointing out spelling, where you can then use that additional 2 hours time you saved studying on something else or just relaxing or spending time on something that you actually want to be doing. The same will apply for the books and questions you complete. Work on the right resources like the Harder Closed Passages book that we actually came out with last year if you need more help in the reading test, because honestly, it's a really good book if you haven't really polished up on the closed passages, and it's very specific to the selective test. We also got some pretty good reviews on that too. And in conclusion, remember that if your childhood friend who is super smart is studying 4 hours a day, don't compare yourself with them. They have different starting points than you, and their situation could be a lot different. You don't know if they have had many tutors, or if they currently have many tutors, or if they studied a lot more than you compared to what you have been doing from such a young age. You don't know if they're doing 4 hours of productive study a day, or if they're context switching between the subjects and actually only getting an hour and a half of valuable study. There are a lot of variables at play, so it's better to control what you can do personally and just try to follow the 5 steps I mentioned above, as opposed to copying what someone else has done well or what your parents think another boy that they know of has done well, and you need to do the exact same thing. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like this video if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't, just because I have some exciting videos that I want to be sharing with you. Anyway, I'll see you next time.